spray. And then, complete na yun. Sprayer, saka yung may drum. And then, binigyan din kami nila ng hand tractor for cleaning for this cacao production. We are providing also planting materials, technical assistance, and then as well as marketing assistance to those who are interested to plant cacao.
Department of Agriculture, Region 9, masaganang ani, mataas na kita. For more information on Department of Agriculture, programs and projects, call us at 991-3188 or you may visit us at General Vicente Alvarez Street, Zamboanga City.
Zamboanga, di ato neste.
Emedia! Solid!
Buong puso, walang alinlangan, buhay inalayngan. Siya'y si Jesus, tagapagligtas ng buong mundo, ang tanging daan. Siya'y si Jesus. Tayo'y matagumpay nang dahil sa Kanya. Jesus, ika'y buhay sa aming lahat. Wala nang hihigit sa lakas ng pag-ibig. Jesus, katotohanan at buhay ko. Kami napapasayaw sa kalayaan mo. Malaya na kahihiyan at kasalanan ko. Binawi ng lahat ng liwanag mo. Magpakailanman, puso't patingin, itutuon sa'yo, sa'yo lamang. Tayo'y matagumpay nang dahil sa Kanya. Jesus, ika'y buhay sa aming lahat. Wala nang hihigit sa lakas ng pag-ibig. Jesus, katotohanan at buhay ko. Kami napapasayaw sa kalayaan mo. Malaya na, hey, hey. Malaya na, hey, hey. Malaya na, hey, hey. Malaya na, hey, hey. Oh, 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 oh. Ngayon ako'y malaya, sa'yo'y malaya. Oh, 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 oh. Jesus, buhay ka sa'kin at nagahari. Oh, 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 oh. Ngayon ako'y malaya, sa'yo'y malaya. Oh, 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 oh. Jesus, buhay ka sa'kin. Oh, 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 oh. Ngayon ako'y malaya, sa'yo'y malaya. Oh, 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 oh. Jesus, buhay ka sa'kin at nagahari. Oh, 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 oh. Ngayon ako'y malaya, sa'yo'y malaya. Oh, 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 oh. Jesus, buhay ka sa'kin. Jesus, ika'y buhay
about the gospel that changes you. God is able to turn your mess into a powerful message.
Jesus is Lord. He's the boss of your life. He's the master.
Christ redeemed you. Christ bought you. You are qualified now.
Real love doesn't just talk, it demonstrates.
And now for today's message.
We're going to look at Psalm 86. It's another psalm by King David, and we'll read from verses 1 to 7. Verse 1, Incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am godly. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call upon you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my plea for grace. In the day of my trouble, I call upon you, for you answer me. You know, one of the most striking things about this psalm is that in verse 1, pangbungad ni David, he claims to be poor and needy, which is kind of very totally illogical. You know, King David was one of the most powerful and richest men in the world, if not the most. And yet here, he claims to be poor and needy. I mean, David could have paid his way out of any trouble or fought his way out of any trouble, you know, with his vast armies and all the subject nations at his disposal. And still, David would claim to be poor and needy. I mean, if David was poor and needy, ano na lang kaya tayo, right? And yet, you know, David wasn't, I don't know, making light of it or exaggerating. You know he meant it, because in verses 3 to 7, David gave us different images of how out of desperation, he had to cry out to God. He said in verse 3, he cried all the day, buong araw. David was crying to God. And then he said he lifted up his soul. Again, he was surrendering his soul to God. Twice he said he called upon God, called on the name of God for his help. And then he said he pled, nagmakaawa siya. He pled for the grace of God. These are obviously desperate words. Desperate words of somebody who is poor and needy. They're not the words of the rich and powerful. And so we can see how verse 1 and these verses we just read are related, in that David's perceived poverty and need drove him, okay, to cry out to God all day. So there is something there. And in fact, verse 5, which I think is the key verse in this psalm, instead of castigating David for being, I don't know, entitled or ungrateful, because ang yaman-yaman na nga niya, and then would call himself poor and needy, actually, God blessed him. In fact, God responded in goodness, forgiveness, love, and grace. So there must be something going on here that's deeper than what we can gather from a surface or superficial reading of this psalm. Okay, let's jump to verse 11. I think verse 11 helps us understand where David was coming from. In verse 11, David said, "Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name." And so David here was asking God to teach David God's ways. Now, again, David was king, and if you're familiar with our long history of kings, kings are not it's my way or the highway. I mean, they're not interested in other people's ways or I don't know, or how the rest of the world does it. I'm gonna do it the way I think we should do it. But David was different. He was looking for God's ways. And whereas generally we tend to fear kings, again, because of their power, and obviously nations feared David, but in verse 11, David feared God. So much so that he asked God to unite my heart so that I might fear you. So David wasn't ungrateful or entitled. He was after God. He really somehow, before God, David actually honestly felt poor and needy. Because David's posture was always he wanted more of God. David never felt he arrived, he was mature enough, he was the most spiritual among. No. In David's heart, he was always before God, always poor and needy. And so it becomes clear to us that when David referred to himself as poor and needy, David wasn't referring to material poverty or material need. What David did was he used the situation of the poor, who tend to be, for obvious reasons, desperate and always asking for help, and translated it into his spiritual condition before God. In other words, David was acknowledging his spiritual bankruptcy before God. David never went before God in pride, claiming self-righteousness or all of the religious, credentials he had earned over the years. Before the presence of God, David felt poor, needy, and naked. He was spiritually poor. What's interesting is there's another Bible figure who talked about poverty in the same terms. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, Jesus declared, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God." It's the same spiritual poverty and neediness that David was talking about. And what it is the deep humility of somebody who recognizes his spiritual bankruptcy and dependence on God and unworthiness of God whenever he comes before the presence of God. It's somebody who is conscious of his hopelessness and lostness apart from the grace of God. Because it's these people who tend to cry out to God, who run to God and turn to God and ask Him for His help and His deliverance. And that's always a good thing. In fact, you might want to say the virtue of this kind of spiritual poverty, of this awareness or self-awareness of this spiritual poverty and neediness, the virtue is it drives you to God. And anything that drives you to God must be good and must be right. So this morning, what do you need to cry out to God for? What kind of help do you need that obviously you don't have enough, that you're not self-sufficient for? What kind of life challenges are you facing right now? What kind of pain, honestly, are you going through? What difficulties in life are you facing right now? And if you're there, all is not lost. You are not hopeless. And like David said, then cry out to God all day if you must. That's what David did. All day, he said, he cried out to God. Lift up your soul to God. Lift up all those, the fears, the anxieties, the depression, the negativity, the anger, maybe the outrage. Okay, lift up your soul, your thoughts, the negative thoughts, all the fears of the future that you might have. Lift it all to the presence of God and call upon God. Call on the name of God. There's a name of God for every need that we might have. Jehovah Rophi for those of you who are sick. Jehovah Jireh for those of you who are in lack. Call on the name of God. Ask Him to fill you with His grace and provide for your need. And plead for the grace of God. God's grace is freely given, verse 5 said, to all those who call upon His name. You know, I had, maybe I can say, two heartbreaking moments just in the past few days. One was almost, I don't want to say funny, but very unexpected. I say funny because it was so unexpected. I was on Lazada, that on-site selling website. I was looking at a product, and when you, dapat lang, di ba, when you're looking at a product, you check the reviews, right? So the first review, the pinakauna talaga, the first review, I assume it was a woman. Well, she reviewed the product, said it's a good product, there's a picture of the product, good price, and then I kid you not, her very next sentence was this: good product, great price, and then she said this: lagi kami nag-aaway ng asawa ko. Wala lang, masabi lang. And then GBE, I don't know what GBE means, and then GBE. Wow. I had to read it twice. I could not believe it. Someone would post on a product review that he or she and their spouse were fighting all the time. And then, yung pagkasabi niya, wala lang, masabi lang. And to me, in a way, I don't know her. I wish I did. But parang it spoke to me of how this person had nobody, the one person she could talk to, she couldn't. Her spouse. Because obviously they've been fighting so much. And I don't know why, but why she couldn't talk to family or friends. If you're in that kind of situation, you cry out to God. I just found out actually yesterday, I think, yesterday, about another friend, a longtime member and leader of Victory, lost his wife, very young, younger than me, to cancer. That's heartbreaking. I mean, I don't have any answers. So, I mean, to be honest, I hate to say it, but I could not picture myself in his shoes. I don't know how I would go on with the rest of my life without my wife. But those are the things that we take to God. That's why we lift up our soul to God. We plead for the grace of God. And so if you're in that situation right now, cry out to God. Bring your needs to Him. And here's the good news. David said, if you are poor and needy, if you recognize your spiritual poverty and need, we will receive His grace. In fact, verse 5, remember it said, His abundant, steadfast love is available for you. And Jesus said, if you are poor in spirit, you will be blessed. So the good thing about the needy is that you will be filled, you will be blessed by the grace, the goodness, and the abundant, steadfast love of God. And that is why we can always, whatever our situation is, we can always worship God from the depths of our hearts. And that's why verses 12 and 13, in verse 1 he said he was poor and needy, but in verses 12 and 13 David said, I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart. And that same heart that's poor and needy, that same heart that he lifts up to God is the same heart that can worship God. I will glorify your name forever. For great is your steadfast love toward me. You have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. Lord, I pray for each and every person here that's listening this morning. May your steadfast love be great toward them and toward all of us. Okay, before we go, again, allow me to bless you out of Numbers chapter 6. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace.